They say people judge single mothers the way they judge broken houses. They drive by, glance for a second, and decide the whole story without ever stepping inside. The room fell silent when the woman stood up. Not the kind of silence that feels respectful. The kind that feels sharp. Heavy. The kind that makes you wish you could disappear. I knew that silence well. I was sitting in a folding chair near the back of the elementary school library, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes earlier. My daughter Lily sat beside me, coloring quietly while parents gathered for the monthly school committee meeting. Outside, the November rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Everything felt ordinary. Until it wasn't. Some parents here need to start setting better examples, a woman said loudly from the front row. Her pearl necklace gleamed beneath the lights as she crossed her arms and looked directly at me. Children deserve stable homes. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Nobody spoke. Nobody looked at her. Nobody looked at me either. Which somehow felt worse. My stomach tightened. I stared down at my coffee cup. Maybe if I didn't react, she'd stop. She didn't. It's hard enough raising children today without normalizing bad decisions. The words hung in the air. Everyone knew who she meant. There were only 24 people in the room, and I was the only single mother there. My cheeks burned. I could feel every pair of eyes carefully pretending not to watch. Lily looked up from her coloring book. "Mom," she whispered. I forced a smile. "It's okay, sweetheart." It wasn't okay. But mothers become experts at lying when it protects their children. The principal cleared her throat awkwardly and attempted to move the meeting forward, but the damage had already been done. The woman sat back down looking satisfied, as if she'd performed some public service. I wanted to leave. I wanted to grab Lily's hand and walk out into the rain and never come back. Instead, I sat there until the meeting ended because pride was the only thing I had left. When it was finally over, parents gathered their coats and umbrellas. Conversations resumed. Small groups formed near the exits. Nobody approached me. Nobody said the woman was wrong. They simply drifted away as though I carried something contagious. Lily slipped her small hand into mine. "Did I do something bad?" she asked softly. The question hit harder than any insult. I knelt beside her. Her blue eyes looked so worried. So confused. "No, baby," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong." "Then why was that lady mad?" For a moment, I couldn't answer. Rain streaked down the glass behind her. The parking lot lights glowed through the darkness like distant stars. "Sometimes people decide things about you before they know you," I finally said. Lily thought about that. Then she nodded with the serious expression only 7-year-olds can manage. We walked outside together. The cold air wrapped around us immediately. Rain soaked the shoulders of my thrift store coat as I hurried toward my aging Honda. The school doors closed behind us. The parking lot was almost empty. That's when I noticed an elderly man sitting alone on a bench near the sidewalk. His clothes were damp from the rain. His shoulders slumped forward. Everyone else walked past him without a second glance. Including me at first. I had my own problems. My own heartbreak. My own reasons to keep walking. But something made me stop. Maybe it was the way his hands trembled. Maybe it was the loneliness I recognized instantly because I carried it myself. I squeezed Lily's hand and turned toward the stranger. At the time, I thought I was simply helping an old man in the rain. I had no idea that one decision was about to change every part of my life. The old man looked up when Lily and I approached. Rainwater clung to the brim of his worn baseball cap, and the streetlight above him cast a pale glow across a face lined with age and exhaustion. He could have been 70. Maybe older. It was hard to tell. There was something about loneliness that made people look older than they really were. "Sir, are you okay?" I asked. He blinked as if returning from somewhere far away. I am fine, he said quietly. His voice was rough, but steady. Just resting for a minute. Lily glanced at me. The look on her face said she did not believe him any more than I did. Neither did I. The temperature had dropped into the low 40s, and the rain showed no signs of stopping. Nobody sat outside in weather like this unless they had nowhere else to go. Do you have someone coming for you? I asked. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Sadness. Regret. Maybe both. Then it disappeared. No. One word. Simple. Honest. I looked around the nearly empty parking lot. Cars were pulling away. Parents were heading home to warm dinners and familiar routines. Nobody paid attention to the man sitting alone in the rain. I knew what that felt like. Not the rain. The invisibility. There is a diner 2 blocks away, I said. Would you like some coffee? The old man immediately shook his head. I could not ask that. You did not. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. Lily tugged my sleeve. Mom, we can share my grilled cheese money. I looked down at her. My chest tightened. The grilled cheese money was 2 crumpled $5 bills she had been saving for our Friday tradition after school. The old man heard her and lowered his eyes. That is very kind of you. 10 minutes later, we were sitting inside a small diner that smelled like coffee, bacon, and fresh pie. Rain tapped against the windows while an old country song played softly from the speakers overhead. The waitress brought 3 mugs of coffee and hot chocolate for Lily. The old man wrapped both hands around his cup but did not drink immediately. He just stared at the steam rising from it. Thank you, he said. Most people do not stop anymore. I laughed softly. Most people are busy. Busy, he repeated. That is one word for it. Lily happily dipped French fries into ketchup while I ordered a bowl of soup for the stranger. Watching him eat was heartbreaking. Not because he ate quickly. Because he tried not to. Like he did not want anyone to notice how hungry he was. We talked for almost an hour. Mostly about ordinary things. The weather. Baseball. Lily's second-grade teacher. He never mentioned family. Never mentioned work. Whenever the conversation drifted toward his personal life, he gently guided it somewhere else. Eventually I paid the bill and stood to leave. The old man rose slowly from his booth. You helped me tonight, he said. More than you realize. I smiled. I just bought dinner. His expression changed. Not much. Just enough for me to notice. No, he said quietly. You reminded me of something I thought I lost. Before I could ask what he meant, headlights swept across the diner windows. Several black vehicles pulled into the parking lot outside. Every one of them expensive. Every one of them impossible to ignore. The old man turned toward the glass and went completely still. The old man stared through the diner window as the black vehicles rolled into the parking lot one after another. Their headlights cut through the rain, washing the glass in white and gold reflections. Every conversation inside seemed to fade. Even the waitress paused for a moment before continuing toward the kitchen. I glanced outside and counted 4 SUVs, each newer and more expensive than anything I had ever driven. The engines shut off almost simultaneously. Then the doors opened. Men stepped out wearing dark coats despite the weather. They moved with purpose, scanning the area before focusing on the diner entrance. My first thought was that something was wrong. My second was that we should leave. The old man slowly placed his coffee cup down. His hands no longer trembled. Sir? I asked. He smiled sadly. It appears my evening has caught up with me. Before I could respond, the diner door opened and a rush of cold air swept inside. Rain dripped from polished leather shoes onto the floor. Every person in the restaurant looked up. A man entered first. Tall. broad-shouldered. Maybe late 30s. His charcoal overcoat fit perfectly. Dark hair. Sharp features. The kind of face people remembered after seeing it once. He paused just inside the doorway, his eyes moving across the room until they landed on the old man. Relief flashed across his expression so quickly I almost missed it. Then he crossed the diner in long strides. The man behind him remained near the entrance. Father. The word landed softly, but it changed everything. The old man looked up. Alexander. The younger man exhaled and shook his head. We have been looking for you for 8 hours. 8 hours. My eyes widened. The old man suddenly looked less like a forgotten stranger and more like someone important. Very important. Alexander crouched slightly beside the booth. His voice remained calm, but concern lingered beneath every word. You left without your phone. Without security. Without telling anyone. The old man looked almost amused. And yet you found me. Of course I found you. For a second neither man spoke. Something passed between them. Familiarity. Frustration. Affection. Family. Then Alexander noticed Lily. His expression softened immediately. Hello there. Lily smiled shyly. Hi. His attention shifted to me. Green eyes. Intelligent eyes. The kind that seemed to notice everything. You stayed with him? He asked. I nodded. He was sitting outside alone in the rain. Alexander looked at the empty soup bowl, the coffee cups, and the remains of Lily's French fries. Understanding settled across his face. You helped him. I shrugged. Anyone would have. The old man laughed quietly. No. They would not. Alexander's gaze returned to me. Something about the way he looked at me felt different. Not judgmental. Not dismissive. Simply attentive. Like he was trying to understand who I was. Most people stopped seeing me after they learned I was a single mother. This man seemed to notice more, not less. Thank you, he said sincerely. For taking care of my father. I felt embarrassed by the gratitude. We had only bought dinner. It was not a big deal. The old man shook his head. Kindness rarely looks like a big deal while it is happening. Silence settled over the booth. Outside, rain continued falling across the city. Inside, I suddenly became aware that every employee in the diner seemed to recognize Alexander. One waitress whispered to another. The cook stepped out of the kitchen for a better look. I frowned. Then realization struck. I knew that face. I had seen it on magazine covers at grocery store checkout lines. On television screens mounted in waiting rooms. On billboards downtown. Alexander Knight. Founder of Knight Global Holdings. Billionaire entrepreneur. One of the most recognizable men in America. And somehow I had spent an hour feeding his father grilled cheese and soup without having the slightest idea who he was. For a few seconds I could only stare. Not because Alexander Knight was famous. Not because magazines called him one of the most successful businessmen in the country. It was because the man standing in front of me looked nothing like the image I had built in my head. Television made people seem larger than life. Untouchable. But standing 3 feet away, he looked surprisingly human. Tired, even. The concern he had shown for his father was still visible in his eyes. Richard Knight slowly rose from the booth and adjusted his jacket. I suppose my adventure is over. Alexander shook his head with a faint smile. You call disappearing for 8 hours an adventure. Everyone else calls it a crisis. Richard looked pleased with himself. A crisis sounds more dramatic. Lily giggled. The sound seemed to break whatever tension remained. Alexander glanced at her and smiled. A genuine smile this time. Not the polite kind powerful people practiced in photographs. The real thing. And what is so funny? He asked. Lily pointed at Richard. He got in trouble. Richard placed a hand over his heart. Betrayed by a 7-year-old. 8, Lily corrected proudly. 8-year-olds are even more dangerous. I laughed before I could stop myself. The entire evening felt strange. A few hours earlier I had left a school meeting feeling smaller than ever. Now I was standing inside a diner joking with a billionaire and his father. Life had a strange sense of humor. Alexander reached into his coat pocket and removed a business card. He placed it gently on the table. If there is ever anything I can do to thank you, please call. I looked down at the card. The thick white paper probably cost more than my monthly cell phone bill. That is not necessary. Maybe not. His gaze held mine for a moment. But I would appreciate having the opportunity. Most people offered help because they felt obligated. This felt different. Sincere. Which somehow made it harder to accept. I slid the card back toward him. I did not help your father because I wanted something. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but curiosity. Richard watched the exchange quietly. I know, Alexander said. That is exactly why you deserve my gratitude. Neither of us moved. Rain continued tapping against the windows. Somewhere behind the counter a coffee machine hissed softly. Finally Richard laughed. Alexander, stop interrogating the poor woman. I am not interrogating anyone. You have that look. What look? The one you get when you find something interesting. Alexander exhaled while Richard looked entirely too pleased with himself. For some reason I felt my face grow warm. Lily solved the awkwardness by tugging my sleeve. Mom, we should go. We have school tomorrow. Reality returned immediately. School. Work. Bills waiting on the kitchen counter. My ordinary life. I nodded. She is right. Richard stepped forward first. To my surprise, he gently squeezed my hand. Thank you, Emily. Hearing my name in his voice felt oddly emotional. You reminded an old man that kindness still exists. Before I could answer, he followed the security team toward the door. Alexander remained behind for one final second. Good night, Emily. The way he said my name sounded thoughtful. Like he was committing it to memory. Then he walked away into the rain. Through the diner window I watched the convoy pull out of the parking lot and disappear into the darkness. 5 minutes later Lily and I were driving home through quiet streets. I assumed that would be the end of it. A strange story. An unusual evening. Something I might tell friends about years later. What I did not know was that less than 24 hours later, Alexander Knight would learn exactly how the rest of the world treated me. And he was not going to like what he saw. The next morning began the way most of my mornings did. Too early. Too fast. Too expensive. The alarm rang at 5:30. By 6:15 I was packing Lily's lunch while answering emails from families at the senior care center where I worked. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and laundry detergent. Outside, gray clouds still covered the city. I had barely slept. Not because of Alexander Knight. Because rent was due in 9 days and my bank account looked like it was already surrendering. By 7:30 I dropped Lily off at school. A few parents stood near the entrance chatting beneath umbrellas. The moment I approached, the conversation changed. It always did. Smiles disappeared. Voices lowered. Eyes slid away. One mother physically turned her back toward me. I pretended not to notice. Pretending had become a survival skill. Have a great day, sweetheart, I told Lily. She hugged me tightly. You too, Mom. Then she ran inside. I waited until she disappeared through the doors before walking back toward my car. As I reached the parking lot, I heard laughter behind me. Not loud. Not cruel enough to be obvious. Just enough to remind me I did not belong. The drive to work took 22 minutes. Traffic crawled through downtown streets while local radio hosts discussed celebrity scandals and stock prices. By the time I arrived at Evergreen Senior Care Center, I had already pushed the morning behind me. Work was easier. Seniors did not care about rumors. They cared whether you listened. Whether you remembered their favorite tea. Whether you asked about their grandchildren. Real things. Human things. Around noon I helped Mrs. Parker organize family photographs in her room. She was 82 and constantly worried people would forget her. "You always make time for me," she said. "That matters." The words stayed with me long after I left her room. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, Alexander Knight sat in a conference room overlooking Manhattan. At least that is what I learned later. The meeting had nothing to do with me. Billion-dollar acquisitions. International partnerships. The kind of decisions that moved markets. Yet according to Richard Knight, his father interrupted the discussion with a simple question. "Did you ever thank the woman properly?" Alexander apparently answered that he had. Richard disagreed. "You thanked her because she helped me. You never asked who she was." That conversation should have ended there. Instead, curiosity won. Alexander asked his assistant to gather basic information. Public records. Employment history. Nothing unusual. The report landed on his desk shortly before lunch. What he found surprised him. Not because my life was remarkable. Because it was difficult. Single mother. Full-time caregiver. No criminal record. No scandals. No lawsuits. Just years of working and struggling. Then he saw something else. Community forums. Social media posts. Anonymous comments. The same accusations repeated over and over. Irresponsible. Untrustworthy. Bad example. Alexander reportedly frowned as he read them. The woman who had fed a stranger in the rain did not match the person those comments described. People often lie to make themselves look better. Kindness is harder to fake. By late afternoon he asked for more information. Not because he was interested in me. At least that is what he told himself. He simply wanted to understand why a woman who seemed genuinely good had become someone her entire community appeared determined to reject. 3 days later my life began falling apart in ways I never saw coming. It started with a notification on my phone during lunch. I almost ignored it. Evergreen Senior Care Center kept employees busy enough that checking social media during work felt like a luxury. But something about the message caught my attention. A former classmate had tagged me in a post. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. Experience had taught me that unexpected notifications rarely brought good news. The video was only 30 seconds long. Grainy. Poorly edited. Completely misleading. Someone had taken clips from different moments and stitched them together to create a story that never happened. In the video, I appeared to be arguing with a married man outside a coffee shop. The truth was far less dramatic. He had been a delivery driver asking for directions. But facts did not matter once a story became entertaining. Thousands of views had already piled up. Hundreds of comments followed underneath. Some called me selfish. Others called me dishonest. A few people claimed they had always known something was wrong with me. Reading them felt like standing in the middle of a storm while strangers threw accusations from every direction. The worst part was recognizing names. Parents from Lily's school. People from church. Former neighbors. Individuals who had smiled to my face while secretly believing the worst about me. By 3 o'clock the video had spread through local community groups. By 4 o'clock my supervisor asked me to stop by her office. I knew something was wrong the moment I walked in. Linda never closed the door unless a conversation was serious. She looked exhausted. Uncomfortable. Guilty. "Emily, please sit down." My heart sank. The office suddenly felt too small. too quiet. Outside the window I could see residents walking through the courtyard beneath the autumn trees. Inside, everything felt frozen. Linda folded her hands together. We have received complaints. I stared at her. Complaints about what? Her expression answered before her words did. The video. Of course it was the video. People are questioning whether your personal situation reflects the values of the center. I laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because sometimes disbelief sounds exactly like laughter. You cannot seriously believe that video. I do not. She spoke quickly. But the board is concerned about public perception. Public perception. Two words capable of destroying a person's livelihood without proving a single fact. My throat tightened. I have worked here for 5 years. I know. I have never had a complaint. I know. Then why are we having this conversation? Linda looked down at her desk. That silence told me everything. Decisions had already been made. My chest felt hollow. Like the floor beneath me had quietly disappeared. 20 minutes later I walked out carrying a cardboard box filled with family photographs, coffee mugs, and a framed drawing Lily had made when she was 6. Rain had started falling again. Thin and cold. I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel while trying to figure out how I would explain any of this to my daughter. What I did not know was that less than an hour later, a report detailing my termination would land on Alexander Knight's desk. And for the first time since he had learned my name, he stopped reading and became angry. I sat in my car for nearly 40 minutes after losing my job. The rain slid down the windshield in uneven lines while the cardboard box rested on the passenger seat beside me. Every few minutes my phone buzzed with notifications. Messages. Comments. More people sharing the video. More strangers deciding who I was. I stopped checking after the first 10 minutes. There are only so many insults a person can read before they all begin to sound the same. By the time I picked Lily up from school, I had rehearsed a dozen different explanations. None of them felt right. She climbed into the back seat smiling and immediately started talking about a science project involving plants. I listened carefully, nodding at all the right moments, pretending my entire future had not collapsed that afternoon. Children notice more than adults realize. Halfway home she stopped talking. Mom, she asked softly. Are you sad? The question nearly broke me. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Just tired, sweetheart. She studied me through the rearview mirror. You always say that when something is wrong. Sometimes I forgot how smart she was. That evening after dinner, once Lily had fallen asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table staring at unpaid bills. Rent. Utilities. Groceries. Numbers covered the pages like warnings. I was calculating how many weeks of savings remained when someone knocked on my door. My heart jumped. It was nearly 9 o'clock. Nobody visited me unexpectedly. Not anymore. I opened the door cautiously. A man stood in the hallway holding a large white envelope. Expensive suit. Professional posture. Calm expression. Emily Carter? He asked. Yes. I have been asked to deliver this personally. He handed me the envelope and left before I could ask another question. I closed the door and stared at it for several seconds. Then I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note and a business card. I recognized the name immediately. Alexander Knight. The note was brief. Emily, I recently learned what happened today. I would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. No obligation. No pressure. Simply a conversation. The phone number was written beneath his signature. I read it 3 times. Then I laughed quietly to myself. The absurdity of it all felt unreal. Billionaires did not call women like me. They certainly did not invite conversations. My first instinct was to throw the note away. Pride can be expensive, but it is difficult to surrender. The next morning I nearly forgot about it. Nearly. Around 11, while I was submitting job applications from my apartment, my phone rang. An unknown number flashed across the screen. I ignored it. It rang again. Then a third time. Finally I answered. Hello? Silence lasted half a second. Then a familiar voice spoke. Emily. This is Alexander Knight. I sat up straighter immediately. How did you get this number? The question slipped out before I could stop it. To my surprise, he laughed softly. It was listed on your employment records. That sounds slightly concerning. Fair criticism. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then his tone became serious. I heard what happened. I am sorry. Nobody had said those words yet. Not my former coworkers. Not my neighbors. Not the people who watched my life unravel from a safe distance. Just him. A man who barely knew me. Thank you, I whispered. I would like to help, he said. I closed my eyes immediately. There it was. The offer I had been expecting. The offer I could never accept. No. The answer came so quickly it surprised even me. On the other end of the line, Alexander Knight fell silent. For several seconds neither of us spoke. I could almost hear Alexander processing the answer. People like him probably spent their lives hearing yes. Yes to meetings. Yes to opportunities. Yes to favors. My refusal landed in the silence between us like something unexpected. Finally he cleared his throat. May I ask why? I looked around my small kitchen. The peeling paint near the window. The stack of unpaid bills. The second-hand furniture I had spent years collecting one piece at a time. None of it was impressive. But all of it belonged to me. Because I do not want charity. The words came out stronger than I felt. I am not offering charity. Then what are you offering? Another pause. A chance to help someone who deserves better than what happened. I rubbed my forehead. Part of me wanted to believe him. Another part remembered every promise that had ever come with strings attached. I appreciate the concern, I said carefully. But I will figure things out. You should not have to do it alone. The kindness in his voice almost made me angry. Not because it was insincere. Because it arrived at a moment when I needed it most. Pride becomes complicated when survival enters the conversation. I have managed alone for 8 years, I said. I can manage a little longer. Alexander exhaled quietly. You are remarkably stubborn. Despite everything, I smiled. That is not the first time I have heard that. When the call ended, I convinced myself the conversation was over. It was easier that way. The next week became one long lesson in how quickly circumstances can deteriorate. Every job application seemed to disappear into silence. Interviews were cancelled without explanation. One employer appeared enthusiastic until they searched my name online. After that, nothing. Even grocery shopping became uncomfortable. People stared. Whispered. Looked away when I noticed. The video continued spreading. The truth remained invisible. One afternoon I opened the mailbox and found a notice from my landlord. Rent was overdue. I sat on the edge of my bed reading the letter twice before folding it carefully. There was still time. Not much. But some. That evening Lily sat beside me at the kitchen table working on homework. Her pencil moved slowly across the page. Normally she loved school. Recently something had changed. She seemed quieter. Smaller somehow. How was your day? I asked. She shrugged. Okay. The answer sounded rehearsed. Just okay? Her eyes remained fixed on the worksheet. Some girls said I should not come to Emma's birthday party. My heart stopped. Why? Lily hesitated. Then she whispered the words. They said their parents do not like us. The room suddenly felt very still. I stared at my daughter while she stared at her math problems. Neither of us moved. Children repeat what they hear at home. That truth hurt more than anything written online. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Listen to me. She finally looked up. There is nothing wrong with you. Do you understand? Her eyes glistened slightly. Then why does everybody act like there is? I opened my mouth. No answer came. Because I did not know. Because I was asking myself the same question every day. Later that night, after Lily fell asleep, I sat alone in the dark living room listening to rain strike the windows. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. One message. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I opened it. Emily. I know you said no. But please call me if things get difficult. Nobody should face this alone. Alexander. The message stayed on my screen long after the room had gone quiet. I read it once. Then twice. Then I locked my phone and placed it face down on the coffee table. The problem was not that I doubted Alexander's sincerity. The problem was that sincerity could become dependence if you were not careful. I had spent years building a life with my own hands. Small. Imperfect. Fragile. But mine. The next morning I woke up determined to keep moving forward. Determination, however, does not pay rent. By noon I had received 3 more rejection emails. Each one polite. Each one final. Thank you for your interest. We have decided to pursue other candidates. I stared at the screen until the words blurred together. Around 2 o'clock my landlord called. His voice sounded apologetic. Emily, I need to know your plans. I understood what he was really asking. Could I pay or not? I am working on it, I said. I just need a little more time. He sighed heavily. I like you, Emily. You have always been a good tenant. But I have obligations too. After the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table feeling the walls close and around me. Outside, the neighborhood carried on as usual. Cars passed. Dogs barked. People lived their lives. Mine felt stuck. Then my phone rang. This time I recognized the number immediately. Alexander. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Hello? I answered. How are you? He asked. The question sounded simple. It was not. Nobody had asked me that in weeks and genuinely wanted the answer. I have been better. Silence lingered briefly. I suspected that might be the case. I leaned back in my chair. Do billionaires usually spend this much time worrying about strangers? A soft laugh came through the phone. You stopped being a stranger when you helped my father. Before I could respond, he continued. Emily, I would like to show you something. What? Proof. My forehead creased. Proof of what? His voice hardened slightly. Not with anger. With certainty. Proof that the story being told about you is not true. I sat upright. What are you talking about? The video. My pulse quickened immediately. What about it? It was manipulated. For a second I forgot how to breathe. How do you know that? Because I hired professionals to examine it. The room spun slightly. You did what? The footage was edited from multiple recordings. Timestamps were altered. Context was removed. It was designed to create a false narrative. I closed my eyes. Part of me felt relieved. Another part felt furious. People lost me my job over a lie. I know. His answer came quietly. And I am going to find out who created it. Rain began tapping softly against the window again. I listened to it while trying to process everything. For the first time in weeks, a crack appeared in the wall of hopelessness surrounding me. Maybe I was not crazy. Maybe the truth still mattered. Why are you doing this? I finally asked. Alexander took a moment before answering. Because good people should not be punished for things they did not do. I stared out the window at the gray afternoon sky. Somewhere across the city, one of the most powerful men in America was fighting a battle that should have never become his. And neither of us knew that the person responsible for destroying my reputation was much closer to him than either of us imagined. The next few days felt different. Not easier. Just different. For the first time since everything had begun unraveling, I no longer felt completely alone. That realization unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. Every morning I still searched job listings. Every afternoon I still worried about rent. Every evening I still checked on Lily twice, before going to bed. Yet somewhere in the background, Alexander Knight continued working quietly on a problem that should never have become his responsibility. 3 days after our conversation, he called again. I was standing in the grocery store, comparing prices on canned soup, when my phone vibrated. Please tell me you are calling with good news, I answered. That depends on your definition of good. I smiled, despite myself. That sounds promising. His tone grew serious. We identified the original source of the video. I stopped pushing the shopping cart. Around me people moved through the aisles discussing dinner plans and weekend schedules. My entire world narrowed to the voice coming through the phone. Who was it? I asked quietly. Not yet. My frustration surfaced immediately. Alexander. I need to be certain before I tell you anything. I leaned against a shelf. You sound like a lawyer. That is unfortunate. I dislike lawyers. The response caught me off guard and I laughed. A real laugh. The first one in weeks. When the silence returned, it felt warmer than before. Familiar. Comfortable. Dangerous. Emily, he said softly. How is Lily? The question surprised me. Most people asked about my problems. Very few asked about my daughter. She is trying to be brave. Children should not have to be brave because adults are cruel. The conviction in his voice made my chest tighten. Before I could respond, another voice called my name. I turned and saw one of the mothers from Lily's school standing near the dairy section. The moment she recognized me, her expression changed. She grabbed her cart and quickly moved away. Alexander noticed the pause. What happened? I watched the woman disappear around the corner. Nothing new. Emily. I hated how easily he could hear things I never said aloud. Just another reminder that some people have already decided who I am. Silence followed. Then he asked a question that caught me completely off guard. And who are you? I blinked. What? Who are you when nobody else gets to decide? The grocery store noise faded into the background. I stood there staring at rows of canned vegetables while considering a question nobody had asked me in years. Somewhere along the way I had become the woman everyone judged. The single mother. The scandal. The rumor. The warning. I had spent so much energy surviving other people's opinions that I had forgotten how to describe myself. I am Lily's mother, I said finally. I am someone who keeps going even when it would be easier to quit. Alexander was quiet for a moment. That sounds like someone worth knowing. My pulse betrayed me by quickening slightly. Before either of us could say anything else, his phone beeped in the background. A notification. Then another. His tone changed instantly. Focused. Alert. I have to go. Is everything okay? Maybe. The single word carried weight. I will call you tonight. The line disconnected. I stood frozen beside the shopping cart. Later I would learn exactly what had interrupted that conversation. A new report had just arrived on Alexander's desk. And for the first time, the evidence pointed directly towards someone from his own past. That night Alexander did not call. I told myself it did not matter. We were not friends. We were certainly not anything more than that. Yet every time my phone lit up, I glanced at the screen. Every time it remained dark, disappointment settled somewhere I did not want to examine too closely. By 10 o'clock I gave up waiting and went to bed. The next morning began with another surprise. An email appeared in my inbox from a local rehabilitation center. They wanted to interview me for a caregiver position. It was not my dream job. It paid less than evergreen. But it was work. Honest work. I immediately replied and scheduled the interview. For the first time in weeks, hope felt possible. 2 hours later my phone finally rang. Alexander. I answered before the second ring. You disappeared. The accusation slipped out before I could stop it. Silence followed. Then a soft laugh. I suppose I deserved that. Relief washed through me so quickly it almost annoyed me. What happened? His voice changed immediately. I found out who was behind the video. I sat down at the kitchen table. Who? This time he did not hesitate. Claire Whitmore. The name meant nothing to me. Who is Claire? A long pause followed. My former fiancé. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Everything inside me seemed to freeze. I stared at the rain streaking across the apartment window. Your former fiancé? Yes. Suddenly several things made sense. The expensive investigations. The urgency. The determination. Maybe this had never really been about me. Maybe I had simply become part of some unfinished chapter from his past. Emily? Alexander asked carefully. Are you still there? I am here. My voice sounded distant even to me. He explained what investigators had uncovered. Claire owned a marketing consulting company. One of her employees had connections to local community groups near my neighborhood. The altered video originated from a campaign designed to damage someone's reputation. Mine. Apparently Claire believed I had become important to Alexander after he began asking questions about me. Important enough to remove before anything developed. The entire situation sounded absurd. Ridiculous. Yet somehow it was real. Emily, none of this is your fault. I barely heard him. One thought kept repeating itself. Former fiancé. Wealthy. Beautiful, probably. Sophisticated. Someone who belonged in Alexander's world. Not mine. I suddenly felt foolish for every conversation we had shared. For every moment I had allowed myself to trust him. You should have told me about her. The words escaped quietly. I plan to. When? Another silence. Soon. I stood and walked toward the window. Outside, people hurried beneath umbrellas. Everyone seemed to know where they belonged. I was no longer sure where I belonged in this story. Emily. His voice softened. Please do not do this. Do what? Push me away because someone else made a bad decision. I closed my eyes. The problem was not Claire. The problem was that for the first time in years, I had started relying on someone. Depending on someone. Believing someone. And that terrified me more than losing my job ever had. Because jobs could be replaced. Hope was much harder to recover once it was broken. I need some time, I whispered. Before Alexander could answer, I ended the call. Then I stood alone in the silence of my apartment, unaware that while I was pulling away, he was already preparing to do something that would change both of our lives forever. For 3 days I ignored every message Alexander sent. There were not many. That was somehow worse. No endless explanations. No attempts to defend himself. Just a few simple check-ins asking whether Lily and I were okay. I never replied. The truth was complicated. Part of me was angry. Part of me was embarrassed for caring. And part of me missed hearing his voice far more than I wanted to admit. On the fourth morning, I woke up to an unusual silence. No landlord notices. No cruel messages. No new rumors. The absence felt suspicious. After dropping Lily off at school, I stopped at a coffee shop before heading to my interview at the rehabilitation center. The television mounted above the counter immediately caught my attention. Every screen in the cafe showed the same news conference. I froze with my coffee halfway to my lips. Alexander stood behind a podium surrounded by reporters. The sight made my pulse jump unexpectedly. He looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone who had spent days carrying a burden he could no longer ignore. Recent events have caused harm to an innocent person, he said. His voice carried clearly through the speakers. Today I am correcting that. The room around me seemed to disappear. Reporters fired questions from every direction. Alexander answered each one calmly. He revealed the results of the investigation. Independent digital forensic experts. Verified evidence. Documentation proving the video had been manipulated. Every accusation against me collapsed under facts. Then came the part that made my eyes sting. He could have stopped there. He did not. Emily Carter showed kindness to my father when nobody else would, he continued. She lost opportunities, employment, and peace of mind because people chose assumptions over truth. That should concern all of us. The cafe fell completely silent. Even strangers stopped drinking their coffee. Alexander was risking something far more valuable than money. Reputation. Public image. Business relationships. He was standing in front of cameras watched by millions and attaching his name to mine. Not because he had to. Because he chose to. One reporter asked the question everyone wanted answered. Mr. Knight, why are you personally involved? Alexander paused. For a second his expression softened. Because sometimes doing the right thing matters more than staying comfortable. The interview ended minutes later. I sat motionless long after the screen changed to another story. My phone began vibrating almost immediately. Former coworkers. Neighbors. Parents from Lily's school. Messages poured in faster than I could read them. Some apologized. Others suddenly wanted to explain themselves. A few pretended they had supported me all along. I ignored every one of them. Because while they were discovering the truth today, Alexander had known it weeks ago. My phone rang again. This time his name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for several seconds before answering. Neither of us spoke at first. Then I heard him exhale softly. You are probably angry with me. Tears burned unexpectedly behind my eyes. No. My voice trembled. I think I finally understand. Outside the coffee shop, sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in days. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized that Alexander had never been trying to save me. He had simply refused to let me stand alone. 1 year later, I stood backstage holding a small note card that I no longer needed. The speech had changed so many times that I could have delivered it in my sleep. Beyond the curtain, hundreds of people filled the auditorium. Community leaders. Teachers. Volunteers. Families. Reporters. The same city that once seemed eager to judge now wanted to celebrate resilience. Life has a strange sense of irony. A stage manager smiled and motioned toward me. You are up next. My heart fluttered. Not from fear. From gratitude. The lights beyond the curtain glowed warm and bright. Applause echoed through the room as my name was announced. I stepped onto the stage and paused for a moment. The audience rose to their feet. The standing ovation lasted longer than I expected. Longer than I felt I deserved. Yet as I looked across the crowd, I realized they were not applauding a perfect person. They were applauding survival. They were applauding the decision to keep going when quitting would have been easier. My eyes moved through the audience until they found two familiar faces. Lily sat in the front row wearing a blue dress and a smile so wide it nearly stole my breath. Beside her sat Alexander. His expression was calm as always, but his eyes held that same quiet warmth I had first noticed in the diner months ago. The difference was that now I understood it. He had never tried to rescue me. He had simply believed in me before I remembered how to believe in myself. The applause slowly faded. I stepped toward the microphone. A year ago, I thought my life was ending. A soft laugh rippled through the audience. I lost my job. I lost opportunities. I lost faith in people. The room remained completely silent. What surprised me most was not how quickly strangers judged me. It was how powerful kindness became when someone chose not to. My voice wavered slightly. I looked toward Lily. There were days when I thought I had nothing left to give my daughter except an example of how to keep standing. Tears shimmered in more than one pair of eyes throughout the audience. Mine included. Then the host asked the final question. The same question every recipient answered. What was the turning point of your life? I smiled. For a second I considered giving a complicated answer. A thoughtful answer. Instead, I chose the truth. My gaze found Alexander again. The turning point was the day someone saw my worth before I did. The audience erupted into applause. Alexander lowered his head slightly, almost embarrassed by the attention. Lily immediately grabbed his hand and lifted it into the air as if declaring victory. The entire room laughed. I laughed too. Later that evening, after the event ended and the crowd drifted away, the three of us stood outside beneath a sky filled with stars. The city lights shimmered in the distance. Lily ran ahead toward the car while Alexander and I followed at a slower pace. Neither of us spoke for a moment. We did not need to. Some silences feel empty. Others feel complete. Finally he glanced toward me. Do you ever think about that night in the diner? I smiled. All the time. He nodded thoughtfully. Funny. One small decision changed everything. I looked up at the stars. He was right. A single act of kindness. A single choice to stop walking and help someone in the rain. That was where the story truly began. Because life is not always changed by power, money, or influence. Sometimes it changes because one person refuses to look away when everyone else does. And sometimes, when the world decides your value without knowing your story, all it takes is one person willing to see the truth.